Philippians 1, verses 12 to 25. There's three things that I wanted to talk about right there in that passage. And I call them the three C's. Paul's three C's. Alright? Because Paul was in chains, Christ was known. Okay? I talked about that already. He'd been chained to the guards for 24 hours a day. And they would rotate through every 6 hours. The next point that I wanted to look at was because of Paul's crisis, Christ was preached. Now it said there in, I think, verse 18, it says that there was other preachers out there that were preaching Christ for false motives. And there were also some out there preaching Christ out of good motives. Okay? Got a little technical issues. The word false means cloak, color, or pretense, or simply for show. So these other guys, there were some, like I said, teaching for the right reasons. They were teaching because Paul was in jail over this, and they knew that he was actually there for God. And they wanted to do the same thing that he did because he taught them to do it the correct way. And also, Paul was not the first person to establish a church in Rome, according to some of my studies. So it's likely he wasn't the only preacher there. There were some preachers that had learned a certain, or earned a certain level of fame, let's say, where they got used to being able to preach and have all these people come and see them, and they got used to the crowds that were around them. Well, Paul shows up, and guess what? He is on fire. Okay? He's got God working through him, and he's bringing the word like it's supposed to be. And these other guys are getting jealous. Alright? He's in jail now, and the guys who were supposed to be doing it right, they're preaching even more now because they say, okay, this guy's really brave. I'm going to go out and preach more because if he can do it, and now he's in jail, what's the word? Right? And then you got these other guys who are like, well, I want to have my popularity back. So I'm going to preach this message because this is what's working for him. And sure, he's in jail, but he's still preaching this message. And people are still hearing it, and he's got a lot of people hearing it. So I want to do it too, and maybe I get some of that fame back. And that was wrong. That's not the right way to do it. So, either way, it didn't matter because guess what? They're all preaching Christ. Okay? They're not using the right motives for doing it, some of the bad preachers, but they're still talking about Christ. Right? The good ones, they're talking about Christ as well, just like Paul. Even when he's in jail, he's having joy because people are talking about Christ. Because he's in jail doesn't mean that he still can't have joy. Because he's chained to this guard for 24 hours a day doesn't mean he can't have joy. He kept his mind focused on Christ, and the guards came to know Christ. Or at least one of them did. He became a member of one of the churches. A whole bunch of other people got to hear about Christ, and that brought him joy. Now, the other C that I wanted to talk about was because of Paul's crisis, Christ was magnified. Make no doubt about it, Paul was in crisis. Okay? How many of you know much about Paul's story? Anybody? Anybody know anything about Paul's story? Nothing? other than the missionary? Kind of an important figure in the Bible? Alright, I got some work to do. Alright, so, Paul originally went to the church in Philippi because he wanted to go to someplace else, I don't remember, but he got a vision of a man saying, hey, come preach to us. So he went there. Along the way, it doesn't say how he got there, but I think most of his journeys were overland until he was sent from prison in Caesarea to prison in Rome. Okay? And he was definitely in crisis because of some of the things that he had gone through. Alright? This man had been beaten. How many of you have been beaten? Like, beaten. Literally. He was beaten. He was shipwrecked. When they sent him from Caesarea to Rome, their ship crashed, and they spent 3 months off the island of Malta. He was in prison for at least over 2 years. He was chained to a guard, which would not be nice. Can you imagine being chained to somebody who needed to go to the bathroom? They weren't going to take the chains off so you could go to the bathroom. Because he was in prison, and that was the custom back then. I didn't learn why specifically they put him in chains. He got put into prison because other people didn't like what they were saying. They said that he was preaching something against the established Jewish religion at the time. And because he was a Roman citizen, he had the right to appeal to Caesar. Caesar was the emperor. Okay? And he was a Roman citizen. He was born a Roman citizen. And he was in another country that was ruled by Rome in prison. And they left him there for over 2 years until a new king, I guess you could call it, came into that place. Once that happened, they were like, well, I don't know what to do with you. And so he appealed to Caesar. And that meant he wanted Caesar to hear his case. So God told him he needed to do this, and he spent a lot of time in prison over that. So back to what I was saying, he was shipwrecked. He was beaten. He was in prison and chained. In verse 20, that's why he said that it was his hope that he will continue to be bold for Christ, as I have been in the past. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ, whether I live or die. How are you? That's cool. In a commentary called Weiserby's Expository Outlines of the New Testament, a guy named Warren Weiserby says, we usually associate being torn between options with being happy. Paul is a torn man, but he is also a vibrantly happy man. He is torn because on one hand he wants to continue his ministry, and on the other hand he wants to be with Christ. But he is a joyful man because he knows he will not be able to lose their case. Because he was focused on Jesus, he was able to find joy in any situation, life or death. So, you guys have probably all heard that verse before, I believe it's verse 20, where he says, for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. I'm sure most of you have heard that before. The crickets are telling me yes. So, Paul's not talking about, he's not saying that dying would be better than the worst life that he's had, because he's had a rough life. He's not saying for him to die would make it better. He's saying that for him to die would be for him to go be with Jesus. And in that case, it would mean it would be better than the best life possible. Okay? But if he lives, it means he gets to continue to teach everyone about Christ, which is just as good for him, because he had a single-minded focus on Christ. He was all about Christ. And so, it amazes me that he had endured so much, the change, the criticism, and crisis, yet he kept all that joy. But when we experience, metaphorical change and critics and crisis, what do? We get bummed out, right? We get negative and we want to moan. We want to say, oh, poor me. This is cool. Don't cry now. Okay. I'm sure Paul cried. That's not wrong. But he had joy because of Christ. In another commentary that I read called Opening Up Philippians, it says, if we cannot share Paul's desire, it's because we have not seen as clearly as he has the wonder of what Christ has done. Meaning, if we can't have the same joy that that Paul has, it's because we haven't really had that same experience that Paul had with Christ. How many of you have heard of Paul's conversion? Do you guys know who Saul was? You do. Okay. Well, not King Saul, but Saul the Pharisee was on his way to Damascus because he did not like what they call believers of the way, which were Christians at the time. And on his way, he was almost there. He audibly heard Jesus talk to him. And so did everybody else. It was like a group of people right here, right? We're on our way to Damascus. Right? What? It's a place in the Middle East. Okay? And all of a sudden you hear this booming voice talking. But you don't see anybody else around. And then you know that it's not any of us. Right? So they were all astounded by this, right? Now, they also saw a really bright light. Like if I were to look up at these lights, I'm going to try not to do it because of my eyes. It'd be bright. I'm sure it'd be more than that. A lot more than that. Okay? But they all saw this bright light. They all heard this voice that they couldn't explain. But Paul, he was blinded. And he heard Jesus say, hey, why are you persecuting me? Why are you trying to kill people that I love? And then later on, when he finally gets to Damascus, a guy named Ananias heals him, showing again the power of Jesus. So he had this genuine experience with Jesus that made it easier for him to have that joy, to keep his mind focused on him. Okay? Now, those of us, we've all had similar experiences. We just might not recognize it. Have you guys ever been worshiping and all of a sudden you can't explain it, but you're on your face, or you're crying, or you're just going about your business, and all of a sudden you start getting goosebumps and talking to God and all of this stuff. It might not be audibly, but you're having an experience. Okay? Now, Paul, on the other hand, it might have been also a little bit easier for him because he didn't have as many modern distractions as we do. Right? What kind of distractions can you guys come up with that we have? TV, video games. Shorts. Alright. What about while we're traveling? What kind of stuff do we have to entertain us and keep us busy? Hitchhikers. Music. Alright. So some of my examples that I have are, Paul didn't have a car. Okay, he was probably driving a donkey. Alright? We have a car. We have cell phones. We have cars with TVs built into the headrests. We have, me personally, I've got a really cool stereo. I think it's cool anyway. Alright? We've got a lot of bass in it, so it's pretty cool, There are fancy stereos out there that you can't even work because there's so much stuff going on in it. Alright? Paul didn't have any of that. Like I said, he didn't even have a car. He was probably riding a donkey. Alright? We have air conditioning. I can almost bet you the only air conditioning that Paul probably had, the only wind that was moving when Paul was riding his donkey to Damascus, or anywhere else for that matter, was probably coming from the camel in front of him. Right? And it was probably not cold air. Just to be safe. So, but he didn't have the distractions that we do. Right? So the secret is this: when you have a single mind, you look on your circumstances as a God-given opportunity for you to share Christ with other people. Okay? So in order for us to do that, we need to have an experience, so that way we can truly understand it. And like I said, we probably already have, but we need to work on figuring out what it is and how it can really affect us. Okay? And B, one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves, one of the things I've been trying to do, like I said, my dad is in the hospital right now down in Georgia. He's having some heart problems. It's kind of hard because, I lost my mom just recently, and now Dad's in the hospital, and I'm struggling, and I'm trying to get down there to be with him and help him out. And it's stressful, and I can easily get down. But I'm not. Because I keep thinking to myself, there's a reason for this. God has a reason for this. Jesus somehow is going to be talked about through all of this. Alright? That's why I don't like my name being up here, because this isn't me. Yeah, I'm up here talking, but somehow I want it to be about Jesus. Alright? So it's not about me. It's not about Charlie. It needs to be about Jesus. My hand is not making very good erasement. So, anyway, we need to focus our mind on Jesus. We have to try to figure out a way to make everything we do about Jesus. And now that I've said Jesus about 50 times in one sentence, I don't know what else to say other than Jesus, right? So, and that's not just the Sunday school answer. I'm not telling you to give me a Sunday school answer. I'm saying, as we go about our days, if you're riding your bicycle, think about Jesus and how you can use that somehow, that riding of your bicycle, to show something about Jesus. When we as Christians go through a crisis, the way we behave shows other people that we're different. It shows them that we're about Jesus if we do it right. So I'm going to challenge you guys for this week, and I want you to come back and tell me how you did. Okay, I'll probably just scare the rest of you off next week. But I want you to come back and tell me how you did. Here's my challenge. I want you to try to think about Jesus in everything that you do. What would it look like for you if before you took a test, you prayed? What would it look like for you if you said, you know what, God, even if I fail this test horribly, if I don't freak out about it, or even if I don't get to sit in a certain place with my friends, or if I get detention even at school, if you keep a good attitude, well, first of all, you shouldn't be getting detention if you keep a good attitude against Jesus. But if you do, or if something negative happens to you, and you keep your thoughts towards Jesus, and you have joy in every situation, what's that going to look like to the rest of the world? Okay. So I want you to go through this week, and I know it's hard to always be happy. I'm not saying to just always be happy. I'm saying, what I'm saying to do is to, when times get tough, think about Jesus, maybe pray, or figure out a way, like WWJD. You guys remember that? Anybody? What would Jesus do? Alright? If you can think about that in the situations that you get into, and you actually do it, it's not just a cool bracelet like these, but you actually do it, whatever you think Jesus would do, and what Jesus would do, not what, I bet you Jesus would really like to treat that slowly. It's probably what he's gonna do. Alright? I'm really down right now, man. I really think Jesus wants me to put you down slowly. I think that's what he would do. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay? What I'm saying is, figure out what you think Jesus would do, which is, by the way, a good place to start is the Bible, actually prayer, and then the Bible, and then do it. And I bet you, your being down and your sadness or whatever is going to be different. You're not going to be in doubt. You'll be able to have a joy that people aren't going to be able, people are going to be able to see it and say, wow, I kind of like that. I want to be like that person. They should probably not have this joy in every situation that they're in. Go ahead, stop it. And that's the moral game.